Hey, so in our virtual lab today, we're going to do 3 things. In the first step, we're going to prepare a salt solution. So this is some handy dandy salt. It's just another shape of sodium chloride. And what we need to prepare is 250 milliliters of salt at a molarity of 1.50 molar. So our first job will be to calculate how much salt we would need. And I've already done that, and I've prepared the salt, weighed it out. For 250 milliliters, I'm going to use a volumetric flask. So the mark at 250 milliliters, probably hard to see in the video, but it's right there. And what we'll see is that the best way to do this is to start with your solute and then add a portion of the water, not all of it, right at the beginning. So I'm going to add part of the water. And now I still have a pretty good amount of room to get the salt solution nicely dissolved up. Now, this particular volumetric flask has a ground glass lid, and so I can even get a really good dissolving of it because I can flip it up and down real well. Just for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to add some food coloring so that you can see what's going on here during the lab a little bit better. Will be green. And I want to make the first one dark. I put a lot of green in here because I want you to be able to see the change in color as we dilute it. Okay. So now that the salt's all dissolved, then I'm going to add water. I can add most of the water pretty quickly, but I need to slow down when I get to the mark because if I go past the mark, it's all over. So now I'll more carefully add water until I reach the mark. Of 250 milliliters. And now I can mix it up a few more times until I have a totally uniform, homogeneous solution. This is then the 1.50 molar sodium chloride. I'm calling this the stock solution because in the next 2 steps, we're going to be diluting it. So in our second step, we're going to take our stock solution. This is sodium chloride at 1.50 molar concentration. And we need to dilute it to a much lower concentration. It's going to be 0.25 molar that we need. And we need to prepare 500 milliliters of that. So I'm going to use a 500 milliliter volumetric flask to do that. So our first job will be to determine how much of this, we won't dilute all of it, but how much of this will we need to take out and then add water to bring it up to 500 milliliters. So I've calculated that, and you should too. And I will need to use a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder in order to do that. So I will measure out that quantity. I'll add that to the 500 milliliter volumetric flask. Now that I'm going to need to add water to bring it up to the 500 milliliter mark. The nice thing about this is that I don't have to calculate nor measure how much water I need to add. I could figure out how much I needed, but all I need to do is add it until I get up to the 500 milliliter mark. And again, I'll pour fairly quickly until I get close. And then once I get close to the mark, I'll use my dropper in order to get the volume right there. Since I have a glass stopper again for this one, then I'm able to mix it real thoroughly. And a nice thing that you can see now about the food coloring that I added to the salt is that you can see that they have different darknesses of green by being diluted. In our last step then, I'm going to use some of the diluted solution and make some smaller dilutions with it using pipettes. All right, so in our last step, we're going to dilute this 0.25 molar sodium chloride solution further into 3 samples in 3 test tubes. And in order to do that, we could use a little graduated cylinder, but we're going to use a graduated pipette. So the graduated pipette starts at 0 and goes down to 10. And so in the first sample, I want to have 3 milliliters of this solution, and I'm going to add 7 milliliters of water to it. And then I'll do 2 other dilutions. So the easiest way to do this then, if you need to deliver 3, is to fill it up to the 7 mark and let it out. And because it's easier to let it all the way out. So here's the way a pipette works. Obviously, you wouldn't use your mouth to do it, but this is one of the kind of pipette fillers that we will use. And what we do is we first get a kind of a tight seal on the pipette, and you'll notice I'm right-handed, but I have a roller, and as I roll this down, the top rolls up, and that draws in. If I roll up, it goes out. Then where my thumb is a release button, and that'll release everything out, so it's easier just to let it all out as opposed to roll it out. So I'll start with this push down, and I will take my 0.25 molar salt, and I'll use a little roller until I've filled it up to the 7 milliliter mark. Then I transfer it over into the test tube. Then, rather than figuring out which way I need to roll it, I could just push the release lever, and the whole 3 milliliters will come out into the test tube. Now, I can quickly then put what I want to have in the other ones. I'm going to have 5 and 5 here and 8 and 2 in the last one. So I'll just turn around. And if I need 5, then I just need to fill it to the 5 mark and let it out. In the last dilution, I'm going to have 8 of sample and 2 of water. So I'll push this back down to make sure I can roll it all the way up. And so I'll need to bring it up to the 2 mark. And then release it all into the test tube. So you can see I have 3 different volumes of my salt solution in the 3 samples. Then I'm going to add the water, so I can just boom, boom, boom the waters. So in the first one then, I need to have 7 milliliters of water. So that means I need to bring the pipette up to the 3 mark. And then release. In the second one, I have a 5 and 5. So I'll bring this up to the 5 mark. And release. And for the last one, I just need 2 milliliters of water, which means I bring it up to the 8 mark. And then deliver. So the way that I've got these guys calculated out, the final volume of each of these is 10 milliliters. There's a 3 and a 7, a 5 and a 5, an 8 and a 2. Last step I need to do is get them mixed up if I were to do something with them. And so my little home mixer is a piece of wax paper. So I can hold the top with wax paper and get them mixed up well in case the process of delivering didn't mix it up enough. And you should be able to see, maybe not so much against my greenish shirt, but you may be able to see the difference in the darkness here. This one's least dilute, this one's most dilute, and your job will be to calculate what molarity of salt is in each of these test tubes. Thanks, hope you had fun in lab today.